Hello everyone, my name is John Michael Bushman and welcome back to the Hololive card game. It's been a while since I did a deck tech for this game, and a lot has happened since my last deck tech, where it was far simpler with just, Sora and Azuki uh, just dominating the meta, and then suddenly set 2 and 3 came out, and now we're on set 5, and this is a set that basically heralded the age of power creep in this game, and getting to 200 damage is now the name of the game. And a lot of decks have stepped up to the plate, and this is not one of them, sadly. I'm making a deck tech of this deck in particular simply because I'm very proud of the work that I put into it. Even though I didn't win the major tournament that I participated in. But I did end up in number 15 out of 30, so that should count for something. And I did perform well, to the best of my ability, but unfortunately, due to variance and other factors, unfortunately, that are beyond my control, well, which is honestly just mostly variance, the deck basically crashed and burned, unlike any other dish that, as I named this deck the Sizzling Hot Kitchen, unlike any other dish that this kitchen could potentially put out. So, we're gonna go through a deck tech, and as I go through the deck tech, I'll also go through the rounds that I went through, and give you guys a small play-by-play as to how each round went. So, starting off with our Oshi, this is the card that basically supercharged the Yuzuki Choco starter deck, which is just giving Choco an Oshi, a proper Oshi card, as it is. The most important skill here is her skill 1, and by the way, I don't have a lot of these alt arts simply because they are worth gold bars, and I don't have gold bars, so I'm just using these images here just as the best possible representation of the deck. But I highly recommend you don't do this because you will quite literally burn a hole in your wallet, especially for the more popular ones. Choco being one of them, because good God, her stage 2 here, the one we'll get to much later, it's worth $100 a piece. So $400 just for cardboard is it's, I wouldn't recommend it, but fans are fans, and if you have the disposable income to do so, then be my guest. But on average, just stick to the base rarities, and then if you happen to pull one from a pack, well, that's your choice from there. But that tangent out of the way, going back to Choco herself, the most important skill that the deck needed was her Oshi skill right here, where for just paying one measly holo power, you can search food, and it is honestly the entire crux of this deck, searching for beef stroganoff or the omu rice. And I'll get to the ratios of the food much later, but we're going to focus on Choco's Oshi card for now, because the one that came from the starter deck absolutely sucks. It just filters through the deck and hopes and prays that you find your food that way. But just straight up searching shit in this game is a lot better, so that's definitely a huge upgrade. Now, her SP Oshi skill in particular can matter, but only if you are on the pure build of the deck. And I have actually faced off against a few other Choco players in the shop just before the tournament started, and their builds are quite sound, but unfortunately they all crashed and burned like me, because good God, there is one particular cat that ruined the entire tournament, and I don't know if I'll have the wherewithal to put it up, but the top performing decks of that big tournament has been mirrored to a recent big Pokemon tournament where Dragapult was the number one deck, and the two decks, both here in Hololive and the one in Pokemon, supposedly run basically the same way. You just shoot the back line down until your opponent no longer has resources to recover, and that's exactly what happened in my round one. My entire backline was, shot up by Okayu and her copies of herself. So, yeah, I was barely able to recover, but we did get to a somewhat tight game in spite of that. So, There is that. Going back to Choco's SP Ocean skill, it can matter, but again, only in the pure variant of this deck. And as you can see, I have splashed a certain 40-year-old pirate in this little thing. And the plus 40 also matters because the food items give buffs depending on what stage of Choco you're in. So, while we're talking about Choco, we're going to now move on to the ratios of the main deck. And starting off with the debut, you have two of them here. This particular pose in particular comes from set 5, or was it set 4? Yeah, okay, set 4. Was it set 4 or set 5? I don't remember anymore. But there is that. So, these two cards in particular, the ratios, you cannot exactly touch them. These are what you need, and alongside the normal PCs and the friendly PCs, you cannot exactly, shave these down. And that also goes for Marine. You cannot stop. You cannot go any lower, because if you go any lower, then you are not going to get anywhere with this. So, these are the ratios that work for me. There may be some changes for normal PC and friendly PC, especially with friendly PC. You can bump this up to hell, even 4. Some people play it at 4, but as has been proven by a lot of people in the shop, and hell, even with my own way of playing the deck, normal PC is honestly far more flexible compared to friendly PC. So the 12 debuts are what you start out with, and then going on to the first stage. This one, I had to like tinker around with the longest, because getting to the seconds is easy enough, but getting who will be bridging to that second has been, quite difficult for someone like me. So eventually I settled on this, which is the nearly vanilla first stage Choco with 160 HP. There are builds that have the 180 HP version, and she has a bonus ability where if she is on the center stage, she does a thing by ramping you, and that is something that purple decks do not have at all. So that's something more for the pure build, actually. But for a hybrid build like this, this version is honestly a lot better in my opinion, simply because the ability here only costs 1 energy, and because this is a 2-color deck, you cannot exactly spare too much in the way of resource management for this game. So that is that. And if it does come to a point where you have 2 food items in your hand, and then you use it for any reason, she can basically attack for free. And it does come up, especially for this particular build of the deck. So there is that. And then moving on to the second stage here, the really pretty one, overlooking the skyline. This is the anti-Okayu card, because Okayu was so common in that particular tournament that the top 8 spots in that tournament I joined was basically 6 out of 8, and it was all Okayu, and there was nothing lower than that. So the blue advantage here is definitely very, very helpful, and her first ability does scale pretty well in spite of its seemingly low damage number, because you need at least 100. You need your seconds rather to hit at least 100, maybe even 120, depending on who you're facing off against. But otherwise, yeah, you're more often than not using mostly the first ability, because this deck doesn't exactly ramp well, as you guys can very clearly see. Uh, and in the longer games, if you do get to the second ability, where you have 3 pieces of energy attached to Choco, you can basically KO a lot of other holomims with very great ease, especially the blue colored ones. So there is that. The optional ability of the second ability here can matter, but more often than not, you're just hitting for 200 against the blue opponents. So there is that. And then moving to the other Choco cards, the first stage here, her primary purpose, and honestly only purpose in this deck, is to retrieve the food that you have already used. So she is a garbage man. So in that aspect, so there is that. And her ability is honestly way too expensive for its own good for a first stage, but it can matter, especially if you don't have any other choice. So there is that. And then the other second stage, I have this in the deck basically as more of a sideboard thing, because there are a few green decks that you were expecting, or rather that I was expecting in that tournament, because there was support for ASCII. And having two of this, which is advantageous against green, is definitely helpful. But unfortunately, because the cheer management in this deck is atrocious, in all honesty, I'm more often than not only able to use the first ability here. And in the parts where I do get to the second one, basically no green player survives against me. And unfortunately, I only face off against one green opponent throughout the entire tournament. And it was at the fourth round, and I was literally near the bottom, and I had to claw my way back up. And it was against Pecora, of all things. And it was an unfortunately unlucky Pecora player. They did not draw any of their first nor seconds for like 2/3 of the game, and they were getting shot down by this Choco in particular so goddamn hard that they had so much energy on the field, but could not convert at all, simply because Choco is this version of Choco is advantageous against green. So there's that. And then moving on to the marine parts. In all honesty, if you're going to splash marine into the deck, these ratios, excluding the one here, this one here, this one is slightly more recent, came out of, I believe, set 4, if not set 4, set 3. This one is also anti-green and only needs 2 energy to attack. And the 100 damage against green is comes up every once in a while, but otherwise, this is just a bridge to get to the, well, the reason for the season here. This card is $20 for a freaking reason, and even the version you see here, the UR, it surprisingly has the same value as the base form for some reason. I guess people have been opening up a lot of set 2, so there is that. And if that's the case, then I might actually just, just splurge and just buy these copies in place of the base versions that I have. So there is that. And of course, going to the abilities that this version of Marine does, this is the win con in the mono Marine decks, or basically any deck that has Marine in it. She is a very, very, very reliable plan B, and you wouldn't have it any other way. So her Bloom effect is the one that basically shifts shit in your favor, and there's like no two ways to mince about it. If you have at least 3 that are stacked underneath her, then she will just deal 50 damage to your opponent's either center or the collab, and that's a very easy kill. And her damage numbers range from as low as 140 up to a maximum of 200. And once you start reaching those numbers, especially with Marine in particular, it is very, very hard to chase her down. And then moving down the line, you have basically the entire crux of the Marine deck, which is the first stage that has a search effect. And they did learn from, it's an in-joke that we have in the shop. They learned from Mume, who doesn't have a once per turn on her search. So they put it on every other set moving forward, and yeah, the search is only once per turn, and having only 2 colorless, by the way, is insane. I did say for Choco that 2 colorless is honestly extremely atrocious, but these are the first stage units that don't really need to attack. They're just utility pieces that get you to the second stages, like this one here or this one here. And then of course, like I said, the non-negotiable ratios of the Marine Splash is non-negotiable, like I said. And then for the card draw in this deck, we now have quite possibly one of the most powerful pieces of support, generic support at that this game has ever gotten, and it has proved its worth in all of the opponents that I've faced against, especially in round 1, because good God, in round 1 in particular, I probably could have won because my opponent did not draw into his second stage Okayus to save his life, but his first stage Okayu was just gunning down my entire board all the way until the end of the game, and he drew into all of his copies of Sora Celebration here. It's a draw too, but there is a chance that if you look at the top 5 cards of your deck, you do find a first stage Holomem from among them, then you add them to your hand. But there are opportunities where that doesn't unfortunately happen, and like I said, I don't have the blinged out copies of the cards in this deck. I'm just doing this as a visual representation. So yeah, definitely a very powerful card, and will likely not be replaced anytime soon, even all the way until set I believe until set 10. That's a very bold statement, but hell, even now with set 8 on the horizon in the Japanese side of things, and set 7, just wrapping up a couple of big tournaments here and there, Sora Celebration is still being used and seen in decks like far and wide. So there is that. Of course, 4 copies of Harusaki Nodoka. This will likely never be replaced. The bill of the Pokemon card gaming community, that was, I believe, banned or restricted to one early on in its lifespan. I'll have to brush up on my Pokemon card game history there. But here in the Hololive card game, draw 3 for basically no downside is absolutely fine, and has become a core part of any deck, like, ever. So there is that. And then, like I said, normal PC is a far more flexible version of friendly PC, although you can use friendly PC in a neat trick that I do. If you have cards that you would rather have in your deck to get search off of other effects, hint, hint, that's what this Marine does. Or you have a food item, because this just allows you, friendly PC in particular, to bottom any card that is in your hand on to the bottom of the deck. If you do search more than 2 basic Pokemon here, basically, so you can put stuff back into the deck using the friendly PC. But unfortunately, the longer the game goes, the less impactful and honestly the clunkier friendly PC gets. So definitely having only 2 copies is the responsible way to do it. And I have actually faced off against a couple of opponents in that big tournament, especially the last one, because good God, he had so many friendly PCs because he wanted to go second. Because I was facing off against Nerissa in my last match, and sadly, Choco doesn't have any advantage over Purple. But guess who has advantage over Purple? It's the OG Marine, and good God. Those 2 girls were hitting damage numbers like you would not believe. And then the last part of this deck, the food items, the ratios, I will explain in a bit, because DIY Miko is in this deck for some reason, but there is a very good reason as to why. Apart from the draw 2, the recovery effect that this card does is honestly extremely integral, because again, this deck does not have really good cheer management like at all. So you need something like DIY Miko. You could bump this up to 2 if you wanted to, but unfortunately it's just a very bricky card otherwise. So having only 1, maybe even 2 copies at most, is the most responsible way of doing it. Then, of course, Tiki Janade, as most people have come to call this card, because nobody wants to call it Boss's Orders. I guess I'm the only guy in the shop who loves to do that, because Tiki Janade was not even said by Sora. It was, I believe, said by Aqua. But I'll have to brush up on my Hololive clips, because that happened like way, way early on in the Hololive's lifespan, so I'll have to brush up on that. And then finally, like I said, moving back to the food items, the ratios for omurice and stroganoff vary from deck to deck. Hell, even the pure variants cannot exactly find a right ratios for get which cards go in which build. But for me in particular, and because of the way I built this deck, having 3 stroganoff and 2 omurice is more than enough, because you have a way to search it anyway. And the Oshi skill is honestly the most powerful part of the Oshi card, and having all of these on top of all of the card draw is what makes the ratios for my food work. And it also doesn't help that the plus 10 boost can help solve math in your favor, and something that you will learn over time as you play this game. The 10 to 30 point damage threshold is what makes or breaks your performance actions. So there is that. And of course, the plus 20 from the omurice is insane, but something that I learned the hard way is that you cannot use omurice if the target you're trying to use it on has full HP. They have to have been damaged. And an earlier build that I had with this deck, and something that I actually discussed with the other Choco player, is if we wanted to have the Stone Axe in this deck, and just so that we can have a way for Choco to damage herself, just so that we can more easily use the omurice. But unfortunately, because space in this deck is extremely tight, hell, even with the pure variants of Choco, you cannot exactly afford to have something like Stone Axe. And besides, it's also unsearchable. at least in this deck in particular, because like I said, the Oshi card here searches for food, so it's basically like her own way of searching for Stone Axe, similar to how Aki does it. So, and the Aki deck now has like six, maybe four to six different ways to search its stone axes. And yeah, that is it for the main deck. As for the spread of the cheer deck, there are 13 purple and 7 red. I have a lot of reds simply because this deck, like I said, does not have really good cheer management. So I wanted to have the maximum number of chances that I was going to hit a red cheer, even though Marine only really requires one. But my luck tends to become very horrendous when it comes to tournaments, but in practice games, they tend to be really good. Otherwise, yeah, the other ratios here are also pretty fine. Again, I don't have the actual cards that you see here. I'm just doing this for a visual representation. And yeah, I went 2 and 3, by the way, in that tournament. And like I said, my last opponent was a Nerissa that we had to walk a very fine tightrope with damage numbers ranging from like 10 to 30 points. Making a difference simply because sometimes my HP values are a little too high for him to clear, or because, you know, purple advantage from Marine is the one that's crimping his style. So there is that. And the only other win that I got from that tournament was my round 2, and it was against Noel and Flair. Unfortunately, I guess my opponent had luck that was as horrendous as mine, because he could not draw his Noels to save his life, so that he can be more protected from the damage output that my deck can dish out. So there is also that. And there's also a funny little thing that happened in round 3, because I miscalculated the amount of damage that my deck here could do, even on top of all of the Stroganovs and hell, even this Marine that does 10 special damage to the center and the collab. I lacked 10 points of damage and had to use Teki Janade just so that I can finish off my opponent in round 4. But otherwise, yeah. The rest of my rounds sadly did not go too well, but I did eke out a winning streak, quote unquote, just enough so that I can be in the top 15. So yeah, that is my deck for ChocoMarine. And will I be running this deck back again? Probably not, because good God, this deck is honestly very difficult to pilot for someone like me, because the amount of resource management that you have to do and the amount of decisions that you have to make is going to be a bit much. But if this is your style of deck and your style of strategy, then definitely give it a go. And hell, you can even tweak some of the numbers here and there so that it can be more comfortable for your playstyle. And yeah, we are going to end it here. And if you guys like what you saw, you want to see more of these deck profiles, hit like, comment, subscribe, and share this among your friends. And until next time, doodles.